We are finally hearing it from the authorities. A response on the ongoing Evergrande crisis from the authorities was long awaited, which was earlier totally dismissed by the CCP and the central bank. So, are the authorities ready to accept what is going on, or are we going to doom with no help at all? Well, what China's central banks has responded on the matter might really surprise you, or it might give you some hope. The bank says there is nothing to be worried. In a recent news briefing, the central bank has told some things which I think need some further scrutiny before we decide to believe it. That's what we are going to do in this video today. To check the real facts and see what the central bank meant when they said not to worry. But before moving ahead, press the subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications. I'll be going to give you each and every important update regarding this Evergrande scenario going on. Now, to quote what the central bank has said, the crisis is controllable, it is unlikely to spread. Authorities and local governments are resolving the situation based on market-oriented and rule of law principles. Central bank official Zhou Len, who is the head of financial market department, said this with utmost surety. The real estate sector is said to be stable and orderly by Zhou. The bank is also urging the property firms to pay their debts without default. As per the officials, any slump in the market is just a natural response to the announced defaults. If we are to go with the bank's opinion, this crisis is just a slight slip from Evergrande's side. Zhou criticized that the company had failed to adapt into the changing economy in the past few years. Evergrande had been blindly expanding and diversifying. That has caused a hiccup, and it will go back to normal very soon. Let me ask you a question. Can an average investor who has been following what's happening in the market believe this? I guess no, and I have the reason to say this. The bank's own actions and the market conditions are telling a different story than what they said in the news briefing. As we saw recently, Fantasia Holding Groups, which is another property developer, has defaulted just after the Evergrande default. The Cynic Holding Company also gave out a warning that they might default on their payments. These news reiterate the fact that Evergrande crisis is just the tip of the iceberg. It is also observed that the government is not intending to help Evergrande or any other property developers to alleviate their debt situation. This is contrary to what was happening earlier. Hui Kenyan, the founder of Evergrande, had received help from local government multiple times before, whenever he faced dead ends in his real estate business. However, now the CCP is taking a different approach. The developers are given a strict set of instructions to do their best to avoid defaults on dollar bonds. They are also instructed to complete unfinished properties and repay the individual investors. But is it that simple to be done? China is trying to make it look like it's nothing. They don't want the investors to panic and make the crash even faster. In fact, the government is buying time by consoling the public that everything is fine. The numbers surrounding the crisis is too big to be ignored like this. As per the reports, 1.6 million households have bought apartments from Evergrande. This accumulates to millions of dollars, and these houses are not yet built. Evergrande has used this money in its business diversifications, most of which were unhealthy decisions. Defaulting by Evergrande has raised an important question on their construction ability. Will the developer be able to fulfill its apartment promises to its customers? To this concern, Zhou has responded that the central bank has ensured help for this. The bank has told that financial help will be provided to Evergrande to kickstart and accelerate its property projects so that the asset disposal happens faster. This should also help the company to roll back to its normal construction pace. This gives a hint that individual investors would be protected at any cost by the government. But what about the wobbling economy? If I tell you the sales of top 100 real estate companies of China have decreased by 36% in September and it is still falling. The real estate stock prices are also falling. In particular, Evergrande's share price had been falling steeply from the last few months. It was closed law before its hold from last 2 weeks in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Unlike how Zhou has criticized, the crisis in hand is not the responsibility of only developers. The central bank had its own part to play in staging this crisis. The first mistake was making the economy of China largely dependent on real estate. Real estate companies and China grew altogether. Now the government wants to clean up. Earlier this year, the real estate sector was put through stringent regulations which the property developers didn't expect. This was done to curb overbuilding The company has seen the signs of real estate sector expanding unnecessarily from almost a decade before. The famous term ghost cities became popular in the last 5 to 10 years. Ghost cities are those villages urbanized by property developers which are filled with new buildings and have literally no inmates. Empty apartments and vacant office blocks made them ghost cities. This was a shocking evidence of real estate market saturation. At first, people bought apartments to live and then they bought them as the investment. So they never lived in there but kept the apartment fresh to be sold after few years. While the buyers for such first-hand homes are less in the market, the second and third-hand homes are more affordable for majority of the Chinese population. The prevailing overinvestment in the real estate sector is an undermining cause to this immediate crisis. For your knowledge, China's real estate is valued at $55 trillion, which is twice the size of real estate in US. It constitutes 29% of China's GDP, which for most developed nations, this component is barely 10 to 20%. When more than quarter of the country's GDP is dependent on the real estate sector, China can't afford to put this sector under pressure. China's GDP has actually plunged from 7.9% to 5.5% in the third quarter this year. That's a steep fall. In wake of all this, the crisis has actually forced government to ease some of the stringent rules. In the last quarter, financial regulators had insisted banks to accelerate mortgage approvals. This is supposed to help the liquidity problem of developers. Another change is giving lenders permission to sell securities backed by residential mortgages. This is allowed to be used to free up loan quotas. Developers' sales has to increase to cover up the immediate trouble in liquidity. The central bank will see how these policies work for now. They will go for further easing after checking how the sales has been impacted by these steps. Meanwhile, the investor community is jittery towards real estate. As we all know, the response of the central bank on this situation has not helped a bit. Everybody knows that they are not speaking the truth. Buyers might be still worried and concerned about putting money into the debt-laden developers. Investors' trust has to be regained in a short period of time for the economy to go better. If the bank's policies do not work, they may decide to include a 25 basis point interest rate cut in 2022. Developers are also struggling because of energy shortage and increasing raw material cost. Warren Buffett has rightly opinioned recently that the raw materials have become extra costlier, which is not a good sign of a healthy economy. Evergrande is in $300 million liabilities. The giant has defaulted yet another payment on October of 11th. This definitely shows that the company is in real trouble. A managed restructure on Evergrande might help to revive this situation. Experts has the opinion that the crisis will further impact the GDP growth and it is going to plummet to 4.9% from the current 5.5%. So by now, you must have already realized that things are not so stable and orderly as the central bank has recently claimed. If anything, we have to be alert about the market conditions and be prepared for a crash. The situation is really volatile. If I have to say the obvious, world economy is going to crash because of what is going to happen inside China's real estate sector. After all, China is the second strongest economy of 2021 and we don't want that to collapse. Now guys, please let me know on which topic should I make my next Evergrande video about. What is the specific information that you want to know about this whole scenario or the upcoming future predictions. So bye bye and take care.